Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I've already reiterated this story a bunch, but our company started kind of on a very simple whim. It was just sort of like, hey, you want to, Jim and I, kind of talking, it was like, hey, you want to start a publishing company? And we both thought that was a good idea. We were just looking for a way to market some of our own compositions that were in the drum corps idiom. And we thought that there'd be some interest in that. So we decided to have a go at it and went and got our business license in the state of San Jose at the time, San Jose, California. And we came up with the company name right away. That just sort of happened naturally. And the rest we just sort of worked out with the tools that we had and the knowledge we had at the time, which was really very limited. Like if you look at, our first book project ever was this book called Fresh Perspectives for the Modern
Mhm.
Drumline. And yeah, that was 98 when that came out. And the layout in it is just atrocious. Like the music looks, it looks terrible, but it's like, you got to start somewhere. And we started with drum corps related stuff. We eventually, he was classically trained. So he was writing, he was writing for marching bands and drum corps. By that time, obviously he was writing for Santa Clara at that time in the late 90s, but he was also doing commissions. So he wanted to publish he wanted to publish one of his easier level commission pieces, which is this piece called Technology, which is for like a beginning level ensemble or very on the easier side of intermediate. And it's actually still one of our biggest selling ensembles in the catalog. But that was our first foot into concert percussion. I was I was initially a little resistant because it wasn't the world that I was living in to getting into concert stuff, but we talked it through and I eventually saw the logic in it and we just decided to go for it. And so then we started releasing some concert percussion pieces and arrangements from other people that we knew or that we were teaching with, like Jim Ancona, one of the members of the 96 Vanguard, Bobby Lopez, or geez, maybe he was 98. I get years confused all the time, but he wrote the first solo for multi percussion that we published, and it was his I&E solo piece called 2 Days. And I don't remember if we reached out to him about that or he reached out to us, but we published that. And so we started to kind of slowly build out this concert percussion part of the catalog. And then you fast forward many years and it's now completely our bread and butter. And so, and then there's the whole VDL, the virtual drumline side of our business, which
Mm.
is a very odd thing for a publishing company to do, is to go into software development. But that was like a side project that was still under the Tap Space umbrella. And so we were doing a lot of different types of things. And so the needs of our time grew and grew, and we started doing trade shows and we started to have to work with customers more, people who were like, well, they're looking at it through our band directors who are looking through our concert catalog and saying, well, this piece is neat, but I don't have a 5-octave marimba. I don't have a water phone. My kids can't play
Man,
this.
I programmed Dystopia a few years ago. Who has a water phone?
Yeah, Jim has a water phone.
Of course, Jim has a water phone.
They're really cool instruments, but yeah, so I mean, we had a lot of this really hard stuff with exotic instrumentation or extended range instruments, and we were just saying, no, sorry, we don't have that a lot of times. And finally we got together and we are like, this has to stop. Like I'm getting tired of saying no or
Mhm.
saying we don't have that. So we got really focused on fixing that problem and we're still focused on it. But, in the process, like we went from, oh, I don't know, just, we had our SKUs for our item numbers for our concert ensembles went TSPCE for concert ensemble dash, and then a 2-digit number, O1, O2, O3, et cetera. And we eventually got up into the 90s and we're like, oops, we didn't program enough digits into the SKU. So we had to rethink that. And we eventually, we went from having really just a big handful of pieces to, I think we're knocking on 800 pieces
Wow.
now in the catalog between where we are now in 2024 and let's say 2006 or 7 or so. So and I think in the early teens of the previous decade is when we really made a concerted effort to go after material that, and this is the sweet spot, as any other publisher and so many instructors know, it is accessible to younger players and developing players, but not totally cheesy or goofy
Mhm.
or silly. You don't want
Hard to
music
write.
that the kids are going to feel awkward or stupid playing. You want them to feel good about what they're doing, but finding, ways to do that creatively that are also accessible to those players is really tough. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
stuff that like ages well is really hard, you
Hmm.
know. I mean, Vin Firth wrote so many great things, but I don't know how well they've aged in terms of engraving, in terms of even just in terms of like vocabulary. I think at this point, even sixth graders usually can pull off more than some of these early like beginner ensembles I'm talking about. So hard.
Yeah. And you never really know for sure, when you take on a
Mhm.
new piece, how it's going to perform. I mean, we have educated opinions based on our experience at this point, but it's still a gamble. And
Yeah.
you never know for sure how it's going to be received. And there's plenty of times, even today, where we put something out and we're sure people are going to love it. And for whatever reason, it just doesn't get that much attention, or vice versa. A piece that we're like, well, we're not crazy about this, but we think it might do okay. So we're going to go for it anyways. And
And
then
it's your
everybody
bestseller,
loves it.
right? Yeah.
Yeah. So it's just, there's no end of surprises with how that stuff works in real
Yeah.
time.
So, kind of on the topic of writing, can I throw a few like rapid fire writing questions at you?
Sure. I'll do my best.
All right. What program do you use?
Mostly Sibelius. I grew up on Finale. I used Finale since 2000 or since 1992, and I switched over to Sibelius in 2005 or 6, I want to say. And that's pretty much our in-house app at TapSpace. And so even if we get pieces in Finale or even Dorco, it gets converted over to Sibelius at this point.
Are there any like engraving do not that you have?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, we could we could have a whole podcast on that
Mhm.
topic alone. I mean, and to be fair, in any of the flagship apps, Finale, Sibelius, and Dorico, they're all capable of producing excellent output. And it's to what lengths the person who's engraving it is willing to go, and where they're at as far as their standard for good engraving. Our standard is evolved over time, probably like anybody else's. And we have something akin to a house style that we use. It's less a set of specific instructions and more just a template file that we've created and modified and tweaked in small ways over the years. Mm. But some of the standard things that call attention to a lack of experience in engraving is collisions. Just any kind of collisions, no matter how big or small, is an example of somebody that didn't really look in a detailed way at their work before submitting it. Stuff that is too tightly spaced, where when you look at it, you just, it's like you're looking at really bad wallpaper and you don't know what to focus on. Music that is super crunched in a horizontal way, like too many measures forced onto a particular system. Page breaks in weird places. That's more for like a finished product, I suppose. We're trying to be better as we go, especially in parts, about being smart about our page breaks. It took us a while to learn that some of what we were doing in the early days with regard to page breaks wasn't helping anybody out as far as
Mhm.
page breaks at logical or intuitive spots in the music. Like using a different font than the default font for, or like a font that would be typical of expression text, like mezzo forte, mezzo piano, dynamic markings, like some people like to get fancy or creative with that stuff and use, like some sort of italic sans serif font for, their mezzo fortes or their mezzo pianos. Um,
Do you have any go-to fonts for titles and subtitles, composer, that kind of thing?
our house font is a font called Hermes.
Okay.
And when we went, let me back up. We went through a period of rebranding and creating a new logo for the company many years ago. And a very talented designer by the name of Bob Beck is the one who helped us. And he actually was Jim's college roommate for a while, if memory serves. They were going to school together as they knew each other. And he helped us design our current coffee stain logo, that circle with the word tap space in the middle. We call it our coffee stain. And I think he might have been the one who suggested Hermes as a font, or he gave us a palette of, a few to choose from that would fit well with some of the graphical elements. And so we settled on that, and we've been using that ever since. So that's really that's our main font for titles. I think for larger text, for like titles and subtitles and so forth, you can get away with a sans serif font, and Hermes is such a font. But when you are doing like technique text and smaller text and even lyrics, sometimes you can get into trouble with sans serif fonts because some characters start to look too much alike, like L's and capital I's, or, a C, a lowercase c and a lowercase e, or an O. And so serif fonts that have the little, the little nubbies, or the little, what do they call them, descenders, that will go below the baseline of the text, like Times or Times New Roman is a popular serif font that a lot of people use. I think that can help for readability for smaller text. But if it's larger text, it's nice to have a little less clutter, in my opinion, and not use a serif font for titles and subtitles and that sort of thing.
Do you have any off the top of your head? Do you know in that template what the like no hit size is, or staff size, like term?
In our
Or do you-
template, let's see, what is it now? It might default at 0.25. That's in Sibelius language,
Mhm.
but I'd have to open it up actually to remind myself what that is. Parts, we usually, again, in Sibelius language, we're usually trying to keep it no smaller than 0.2, but more ideally around 0.25 or even 0.28. And again, if it's a part for percussionist, it might be like, if it's a part for a timpanist, it might be on a stand that's some distance from that player. So if the music's too small, it's kind of creates an undue hardship for that person to read it. And I suppose that could be true of any number of percussion setups where the music might be, they might have like one of those makeshift do it yourself, sort of like six up,
Yeah. Yeah.
piece of pasteboard or something, and put all of
When you
your
flip
sheets
it,
on. Yeah, and then you flip it around, and so if the music is too small, it might make that a little hard to do. So we just, as we evolve, we're trying to just get smarter about thinking of the way something's going to be used. We are distributing our parts digitally, which means we have to kind of conform to an 8.5 by 11 size, which it could be argued is not the ideal size for music. A lot of people like the 9 by 12, and I like that as well. But just given various logistical considerations in terms of cost effectiveness and what's the word I'm looking for, just the ability for a bunch of different people to use it, people that have, most people don't have the ability to print 8.5 or anything larger than 8.5 by 11 sheets. So with that in mind, we try to keep things like page turns in mind and size of music for parts in mind. If it's the type of piece that's harder and is likely going to be, put onto a pasteboard like we were just describing, it's probably going to be played by a more experienced player. And so there might be some different leeways there, as opposed to if it's an easier level piece, you might need to just really kind of make it as straightforward as possible, or even regiment, the number of bars per line to fit with the phrasing of the music, so that they're not having to jump down a line. If for whatever reason, if it's a 5-bar phrase, if we can keep it from going 4 bars in one system and then the last bar on a subsequent system, it's easier. And just anything like our philosophy is that we just want anybody who buys a piece of ours, when they pull it out and they look at it and they look at the setup diagram, they look at the instrumentation list, they look through the music and through the parts and so forth, that it just works and it makes the most amount of sense that it can make, and that we've vetted it for potential issues like, well, here, what's this note head mean? I don't see this in the legend, or, this says whip crack, but this isn't in the instrument list on your website. So like those kinds of things where they're in percussion, since there's so many different types of instruments that could be part of any piece, it really does take a careful eye and to think through it like a customer or like a band director when you're getting the thing ready, so that you can hopefully try to solve all those issues before they happen. And it's different ways of thinking. Like, composing music is sort of one mentality that you get yourself into, where you're just trying to be creative and you just want to get your ideas out as best you can. Engraving is another mindset, where you're taking what's on the page and you're really trying to make it look beautiful and make it look smartly laid out and clear to whoever you're communicating with. And then, looking for errors is another mindset. So we have this spreadsheet of 100 rows of checks and balances and different steps for any piece that goes through our pipeline. We've made every mistake you can make, and we've printed scores and pieces with mistakes and blank pages, or pages that were, somehow got mixed up in their ordering, and, just all kinds of crazy stuff. So we've learned over time to guard against that with a systematized process that we stick to, and then tweak in small ways over time to optimize it. We're also very fortunate to have some contractors that work with us and we work with, who do some of our engraving and editing. And we're really lucky to have a team of, really smart, super nerdy percussionists who get it from all angles. They're players, they're teachers, they know what they like to see and what they don't like to see, and they bring their expertise to what we're doing, and they make what we do stronger through all of that. So yeah.
Well, man, we're all a big fan of what you do. I love the ability to organize. Well, I need a quartet, and it needs to have this instrument, this instrument. It's just such a powerful website and so many great pieces. So thank you.
Yeah, thanks for saying so. With the website was another big overhaul that happened a number of years ago now, where we really realized, well, we need filters. And
yeah, it's great.
So,
it's awesome.
Yeah, we what do we want? Well, okay, let's shoot for the moon. And we have, I forget the number of filters, but there's a ton of them, where you can filter by range of instrument and, how many instruments you might have, how many timpani do you have in your band room, a bunch of different genre filters that you can apply, state list filters, obviously things like level and number of players and duration and things like that. But, you can search for a drummy piece on our website. If you just want something like a quartet that's drummy, you can go in and say, I want it for 4 players at this level, and I want it to be drummy, or I want it to be like a holiday piece, or that sort of thing. So yeah, we worked hard to create that.
I have one more writing question for you that might tie into a couple other questions, but is Martian Mambo really the first thing you ever wrote?
Well, basically, that's the first memory I have. It was either that or this cadence called Electric Wheelchair, which...
And I have a question about that one too, by the way.
That wasn't originally called Electric Wheelchair. I think we just called it Cadence because I didn't have a name for it. But they both happened around 1990, which is my 3rd year marching. And the Electric Wheelchair came about because back in those days, we still did a handful of parades in our season. And we didn't really have a cadence. We would use like some like little basic, 16th note,
sweet 16,
two height, tap accent exercise to get the core around. I'm like, okay, I feel like we can do better than that. So I just took it upon myself to write a bunch of stuff down. And as I've recounted a bunch of times, I just was very fortunate to be in a program with Ralph Hardiman and Glenn Crosby and, Kent Cater and Scott Johnson was there at that time and Rob Shavera and just some great teachers and people who were empowered me to do this kind of thing. Martian Mambo happened around the same time, but I don't remember which was first. And that one came out of the fact that I was a big Mitch Peters snare drum studies fan.
Yeah, likewise, man. Likewise. That's a great book.
I just loved his, like, his etudes you could hum, or like they were memorable and they had cool little hooks.
You ever tried playing them on tambourine? Just as a quick side note.
No, you wouldn't. Nobody wants to see me play tambourine. But I loved his books, and I got stuck on that 1116 etude. It was number 21 or 22 or something, and I just remember having the idea this would just be a killer, like kind of on the field warm up type of thing for the group, and I just kind of went, let me take a stab at that, and I just sort of puked it out in a very short amount of time. And we were able to play it, and it ended up being fun, and it really changed my whole trajectory, I think, because
like my question here is, most of us mere mortals, the first thing we write is not something that could be published decades later and still be so good. What's up with that?
Well, I appreciate the compliment. I mean, I wasn't looking at it from that standpoint. I mean, it was kind of the same me who thought, oh, I'm going to play drums so I don't have to carry heavy things. It was just like, I was an excited member of a great percussion program. And I was really excited about the year 1990 in general on a variety of fronts and for different reasons. And I was just like, I had fresh, positive energy about it. And I just kind of became emboldened. And, I was just very fortunate that, it was received well and people dug it. I mean, it could have been a flop. It could have been so hard that we couldn't play it, or that it was, the first time that I presented it to Ralph, it was like, hey, I have this thing and thought maybe we could try it. And he's like, okay, you're teaching it. And because of the other, members of the drum line being willing to learn it and being enthusiastic about learning it. And also because it just came together reasonably well for something in 1116 where, you look at it on paper and you go like, what is this? But it turns out it's really not that big of a deal. It's 3/4 with a short middle beat. Mm-hmm. And that's the way I explained it, I think, from the first get-go. And so I was probably talking with the section leaders of the basses and the snares and being like, here's how I would do it. It's like 3/4, but it's got a short middle beat, and that's how you feel it. And so they were like, yeah, that makes sense. And they went off and taught it. And, we learned it very fast. And because of that, all of those factors working together, we were able to have it in like basically performance ready mode, or at least exhibition ready mode for Ralph and company to come check it out. They were like, yeah, that's cool. Well, let's do that. If it had gone a different way or it was a total mess, he might've said, yeah, I don't know. And rightly so.
You being, I can tell you're fairly humble, but even looking back, are you maybe a little bit proud of such a great first product? I mean,
Sure. Yeah. I mean, back in those days, I definitely felt like a little rock star once we started competing in 1990 with those two pieces that became part of what we would play during warm-ups. And so we started having more and more people come to check the stuff out. And, I mean, I was just probably like blushing from year to year with pride at that time. And, Ralph always would tell people who asked, just like, I didn't write that. Like sometimes people would say, oh, like he tells a story of showing it to Hannum and Hannum like, man, Ralph, that's great. He's like, oh no, I didn't write that. He wrote it. And, here's this gangly kid in the tenor line. So yeah, totally. It's not like I set out to be great. I just set out. I cared a lot about what I was doing at that time and about what we were playing, and I just, you know, I didn't really know that I had a talent for writing. I felt like I felt like we needed something, and I felt like I'm just going to do it, So that's
Well,
how that kind of came
and
about.
the irony of that is, and they talked about this on the Drum Corps Copy Shop podcast, but your writing is still sticking around, and this is great because I meant to tell you this. I gave my kids cheesy poofs, it's in their book, and they get to the part where it's the fivelets, and they're
Mhm.
like, we don't know how to play this, and I'm like, guys, play a triplet tap roll, go. Right? And they, since they're high schoolers, they slur the crap out of it and it turns into fives anyway. And I'm like,
Yeah.
look, you're playing them on accident. Now just do it on purpose.
Yeah. I don't tend to write things that don't feel natural to play to me.
Mhm.
I don't have the mindset where I'll have something and then I'll try to make it harder than it needs to be. And I don't think everybody's like that. And I don't even know that, in the context of the activity, that's a bad thing to be the other way around, where you
Yeah.
might try to make something like just put a flam in the middle of a 16th note passage, not because it makes a musical impact, but because it's hard and it's fun for the kids,
Mhm.
the members, shall we say. So, that's fine, but I'm not like that. I want to, the way it feels is important. So it has to flow good off the hands. And that's the way I tend to write. So fives are just, it, like you said, it's like, that's the same thing I would do. It's like, well, look at the sticking. And this
Yeah.
is something you already do. It's just, we're just going to like purposefully
Well,
relax it. So
yeah, right. It's hilarious. I asked them to play clean, bit rolls with like tap drags.
mhm.
And it's a crapshoot. I asked them to do fivelets, and they're like, I have no idea how to do this. Yeah, you do.
It's like you're doing it already in the wrong
You're doing
context.
it. Yeah, you just don't know. Yeah, right. You're doing the right thing at the wrong time every time.
Yeah.
So, I want to ask about electric wheelchair. So it starts with this drum lick, and at first, when I heard it, I was like, well, that's kind of like Crazy Army. But then I pulled up Crazy Army today in preparation for the interview, and I'm like, well, actually, it's kind of that's different. So, where did you first hear that kind of thing?
I first heard that as the solo that Steve Gadd played on the Burning for Buddy video. That was Gadd, Kaluta, and Weckel. That was the start of his solo. And it was I came to find out it was a trademark signature thing that he would do because he has the drum corps background as well.
So what that was Crazy Army then, right? Wasn't
Yeah,
that one of
yeah, exactly. I mean, he played it with, I'm pretty sure he was using 7 strokes rather than 5 strokes.
yeah.
Well, it's funny actually. Now that I'm talking about this, there was a previous version. The first version didn't have, the first version was a much more basic pedestrian tripletized one that just went like, it was like ra cha cha ra cha cha ra ta ta cha ta ta cha 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 ra cha cha ra cha cha ra so it went from a triplet feel
Mm.
and then like scene change with the flam drives on the top bass and then the big pop 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 da, da, that the whole battery plays.
Mm.
That's the way the first edition went. And then sometime later, after that Burning for Buddy thing, saw that for about 1,000 views.
And then he goes just nuts.
He
on
goes
the
into the
cowbell.
Mozambique. Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah. Signature Gadd stuff. Yeah. So great.
I love Vinny on that video because he'll play the nastiest stuff, and then he kind of winks.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just like, all right, go ahead and try now.
Yeah. I mean, the 3 of those guys, what a great pick for the first episode of that. And they're just like a 3-headed dragon, just raining fire on everybody.
Yeah. It's a great way to put it.
In their own way.
But yeah, each head of the dragon has a personality that's so different.
Totally. Yeah. And Weckel with his
The
curly
mullet.
locks.
Oh man, the
Yeah.
mullet.
Yeah. Yeah. It's great. I love everything about each one of those players, and they're all like heroes of mine. Yeah. I think I rattled off Steve Gadd initially, but I don't know why that was why I forgot about him. But he's kind of one of the first drummers that really turned my head around, because I think I heard Asia on the radio and didn't know anything about Steve Gadd at the time, and was just listening to that drumming going, what is that?
How's he doing that? So I posted on the Drum Corps coffee shop page because I knew they had interviewed you. And I said, "Hey, any questions for him from you fine people?" And so this segment will be Murray Gusseck answers troll questions.
Okay.
So let's see. Ron Eichstedt, top contributor on this page. He says, "Does pineapple belong on pizza?"
I like pineapple on pizza. I've grown to like that as long as it's done in proportion. It can't be too much, and it can't be like dumped straight out of the can where all of the pineapple juice just gets all over everything. Like, they got to be relatively dry pieces,
Mhm.
and they've got to be applied sparingly. But you do that with pepperoni and jalapenos, and that's my favorite pizza jam. Also cashews, and you bake cashew halves placed sparingly and bake those on there. It's absolutely delicious.
You did
And
so
then,
well the whole interview.
oh
And now
man,
you've lost all credibility.
don't bake them the whole time so they burn. Just, in the last maybe 5 to 7 minutes, take the pizza out, have your halves ready, and just like sprinkle them on there. They're totally delicious.
Janelle Ewig says peanut butter thin or thick on both breads with jelly in the middle, or peanut butter on one bread and jelly on the other.
All right, these are important questions.
I know.
Geez, I haven't had a peanut butter and jelly sandwich in a long time, but I love peanut butter, and I enjoy jelly. But I really love peanut butter, so I like it thick or thin, but probably thicker is better. And I'd probably just do one side of the bread.
Oh man! All right, so Phil Watt, who is an admin, says, "Who does your hair?" Question mark, exclamation point, question mark. And then Dave Lancaster says, "You beat me to it." So they really care about your hair.
Yeah, my hair is currently in a "where are they now" file. Basically, I'm starting to kind of thin out. So, but technically, a woman in Vancouver, Washington, does my hair.
Mary Gromko Murray says, "Just ask him when he and his woman are coming to my house for dinner again."
Yeah, we were probably overdue. We'll circle back around on that, Mary. But yeah, we'll get down there at some point.
One last one. This is the tradition on the show. This is, the back of the band room, right? So since percussionists are kind of the troublemakers of the group, what's some trouble you've gotten into in the back of the band room, either in middle school or high school or in your professional world?
That I can recount in public? I was I feel like I was a relatively like clean kid and reasonably behaved. I mean, I wasn't playing percussion in middle school, so that doesn't count. I did band in high school, and I did concert band and stuff like that. So I have the most vague memories of what our percussion cabinet looked like, and a few minor things. And I even played in a few like orchestral gigs around town in Redlands. But yeah, I don't really have anything interesting to add in that regard, at least that I can utter out loud. I remember getting in trouble for borrowing something that our instructor at the time like didn't want me borrowing. It was a piece of gear, but yeah, that's not going to be interesting to anybody. So I have to punt on that one.
What piece of gear was it?
I don't even remember. It could have been a set of tenors. It could have been a snare drum. This is probably when I was like an upperclassman and thought I knew everything about everything and thought I could just do what I wanted. But yeah, I remember getting in trouble a little bit for taking something that I shouldn't have taken, at least without checking with the proper authorities first.
Yeah, especially since you were a percussionist in middle school. I mean, not everybody gets into the trouble that some of us got into. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, I do remember in middle school the kids that I envied because they only carried drumsticks to school. Like, I remember them getting in all sorts of trouble.
Okay, like what?
Well, I don't remember actually what they did. I just remember the band director getting very angry, and we had a middle school band director who literally threw chairs on multiple occasions.
I would throw screwdrivers, man.
Yeah. Well, you go back enough in drum corps and you'll kind of come across, like, I think Scott still tells the story of Bob Kalkofen, like putting a a belt around his middle with a spike to keep his elbow from coming in,
Oh my God.
which, it's something you wouldn't see these days. And
That's barbaric.
yeah, I remember, like, and I'm grateful for, when I was in a first year tenor player, I was like slouching, and we had the old like fiberglass harnesses, those old like rigid solid pieces from like Hadley or whatever. And if I wasn't, like, he didn't have my shoulders back and was filling out the harness, my tenor mate would just jam his drumstick in between the hole that was created between my chest and the harness.
Oh my God.
To
Mean.
remind me to, like, not leave a space there. And
Mm.
it worked, and I bet you that Scott would say, what Cal Coffin did for him works for him too, even though you wouldn't see that type of approach used these days.
But oh my gosh, dude, thank you so much for sitting down with me for several hours. I really appreciate it, man.
Hey, it's been my pleasure. I appreciate you taking the time to ask me some questions. It's fun to kind of go back through the memory banks and try to pull out whatever's left in there, which isn't much these days. But all right, Trey. Well, thanks again, and yeah, I'll look for this to drop at some point.
Well, thank you for sitting and talking with me, man. This has been literally a dream come true. It just week after week, I keep getting dream come trues. And thank you for being part of that.
Yeah, that sounds like you got a really cool thing going on. I watched some of your John Riley interview. I thought that was great.
Man, he's something else.